Are you being manipulated? Nah. Welcome to The Big Puzzle. In this podcast, we explore the subtle connections between science, religion, politics, economics, and history. One piece at a time, we unveil the big picture of this shared experience that we call life. So for today's piece, we're going to be discussing about one of the most prevalent methods of manipulation that we are experiencing these days. And to illustrate it, let's start with one scenario. Let's say that your brother-in-law has just opened a restaurant and he's not been very successful. So there's several reasons for that. One could be that the food is expensive, also that it's not very good and it's not well located. So yeah, it's really not a good restaurant, but you still want to help him. So you know about a group of people who are actually planning to go eat somewhere, and you want to convince them or manipulate them in a way that they would go to your brother-in-law's restaurant. You know that they will be gathering. You won't be part of that discussion, but you know enough about them to know that they're probably going to decide just to go to McDonald's. They all like McDonald's and it's cheap, it's what they enjoy doing. So how can you convince them to go to the restaurant of your brother-in-law and not to, their normal option? The way you would do it is like this. So you have to talk to them individually. To each of them, you will say pretty much the same thing. You will say, I was meeting with the guys the other day and they were very excited about this new restaurant that it was recently open. It's called La Cuisine de Goutan. Have you heard about it? Oh, well, they will say it was really, really good. And and then they start mocking Jimmy because he always likes to go to McDonald's, and they said, well, only simpletons go to McDonald's. And so, yeah, that was kind of interesting. So if you do that with all of them individually, what will happen when they meet and they start discussing? Well, probably nobody's going to bring up the option of McDonald's, even though that will be the option that everybody will select. And at some point, somebody say, hey, have you heard about La Cuisine de Goutan? Yeah, well, probably, yeah, we should go there. I heard it was really good. In that way, you can convince them without even being in the meeting, in the discussion, to go and get something that nobody really wants. So that is called the Abilene paradox. And basically, the Abilene paradox illustrates the situation where a group of people make a decision that none of them agree with, just because they believe that the other ones are the ones who like that decision. We can be a little more dramatic. Let's say that you want to overthrow a government. How can you use, the Abilene paradox to overthrow a government? If you know the generals that are meeting to make a decision about what to do, you can tell pretty much the same story to all of them. Say, hey, I don't know if you heard, but I just wanted to let you know that they just told me that they created this meeting to see if anybody would oppose to their plans, because they're going to dispose pretty fast of anybody who really opposes the plan to overthrow the government. So just be aware. I don't know what your position is, but I just wanted to warn you. And then you do that same thing with all the generals. What will happen when they meet? Well, nobody will be willing to speak their mind. Maybe all of them oppose to overthrow the government, but they will still do it just because they fear what the others would do. As you can see, this is a very useful technique of manipulation. And later we will be discussing some examples that we probably are facing in our everyday lives, and sometimes we realize, sometimes we don't. But the whole idea is to create this perceived peer pressure when there's really no peer and there's no pressure, but everybody believes that there is. So it's very useful because you don't need to convince people about changing their minds, and you don't even need to be in when they're making the decision. You're not arguing for a cause. It's not a competition of ideas or a debate. You can be, thousands of miles away when they make the decision, but still you can force them in a way to make a decision. Well, this obviously is something that could also happen naturally. And I will tell two personal stories about this. And I think they're pretty funny. The first one was when many years ago I was deciding what could I give to my wife as a present for Christmas. I wanted to buy her a music CD, but I was not sure, which kind of singer she liked. We were, we haven't been married for too long. So I decided to do this way, not to show my hand. I went to her and said, hey, did you hear this girl? This was Charlotte Church. Did you hear her? I think she's pretty good, right? She said, yeah, I think I like her. I heard, her on the radio, whatever. And so I said, okay, turn around, say, okay, this is the present. This will be a Charlotte Church CD. So I followed my plan, and on Christmas Day, I gave her my present, and she opened it, and she didn't react like I would expect. That she handed me her present, and when I opened mine, it was another Charlotte Church CD. So what I was trying to gauge her interest in that singer, she interpreted like I was interested on her. And yeah, I was. I mean, it was not bad. And it was a good thing that we both chose a different album. So we ended up having two different Charlotte Church CDs. But it's kind of an interesting thing that probably was not my first option for my present, and that was probably not her first option for her present. But we both, ran under the wrong assumption. The other personal story is kind of, I think, more interesting, and it was kind of a perfect storm situation. I won't give you all the details. I might do it in some other video. But the thing is that I ended up being in a conference room where two important people were meeting, but I was not properly introduced. And these two people, they did know each other, but not very much. So one was a man, the other was a woman. To give you some context, the woman eventually ended up being candidate to the presidency many years later. So they were kind of heavy people. What was interesting, they were discussing some plans. And this is the dynamic. And I couldn't understand what was going on when I was there. So this is what I realized after the fact. So what happened was that the man started to explain the plan, and he would be looking at the woman. And, the woman would not. But once in a while, he would also, look at me. And he would talk to me. And I had nothing to do with the decision. I had nothing to do with either of them. But I ended up nodding as well, being polite. And then when the woman would be talking back and expressing her opinions and things like that, she did the same thing. So she looked at the man, and then once in a while, she looked at me. What was interesting that as the conversation devolved, they started looking at me more and more, to the point in which they were not talking to each other at all. They were both just talking to me, and I was just standing there nodding to both of them. So what was going on? I think that what happened, that since none of them knew who I was, they both assumed that I was with the other person. So when the man talked to me and initially, and I nodded, he saw that the woman would also talk to me. So in his mind, he started thinking, well, this must be an important guy, because if this woman is looking at him and expecting his validation for what she's saying, he's probably an important person. I won't ask who are you, but that was the assumption. So interestingly, the woman thought the same thing. When she saw that the man was talking to me and I was nodding, she thought, well, maybe he is the decision maker here, because this other guy is actually looking at him when he's talking. So they unconsciously started to talk to me more and more, until I was the only person that they were talking to, and I was just there nodding around. They finished the discussion, their plans, and they left from different rooms, and I just stood there confused about the whole situation. Later I thought, well, if I had realized that the amount of power that I had at that moment, I maybe had misused it. But that was an interesting, and there's a second chapter to that story, but it's not related to this particular topic that we're discussing. So I will come back to that probably in another video. So sometimes these processes of misinterpreting the situation, misreading, and making decisions that you don't agree. Because what was the wrong decision? Well, talking to me. I was nobody. I had zero power in the decision that they were making in the discussion. I had zero knowledge. I just was being polite and nodding to two important people that were talking to me for some reason. In this case, the wrong decision was talking to me. Now, we have talked about how to overthrow a government. But let's say that now what you want is not to overthrow the government. You have a group of people that is probably plotting to overthrow the government. And again, you need to somehow prevent them from doing so. In this case, you could do a simplified version of this manipulation technique. And it works this way. Instead of telling them, one by one that, the other ones believe this or the other ones believe that, you could be more direct in that case. You could say, what, I heard that somebody there is a spy and is going to go and tell the government. And they will, take action immediately. And suddenly you have a room full of the biggest loyalists ever. So as you can see, this is a very powerful technique. And why does it work? Well, we will be discussing this a little further, but there's one component that is essential for this, and it's fear. You have to instill fear in people. Fear is essential. That's what it's the most effective way to implement this technique. Let's talk about some examples on our everyday lives. For example, I would argue that 95% of the people believe that the DEI initiatives are just dumb. So this diversity, equity, inclusion thing is an elaborate scam. But the problem is that nobody's willing to say that because you have the risk of getting in trouble for saying like that. And you would eventually or immediately be accused of being a bigot or being a racist or being whatever. That is why nobody speaks up. And when you go through a training, everybody is saying DEI is the best thing ever. Nobody's willing to risk it. So that's something that happens every day to pretty much all of us. Another one, well, we're in election time, and the media has a way to implement this by instilling in the population the idea that one of the candidates that they don't like, that if you say that you support him, you are immediately racist and you're a bigot again. So instilling that fear that you'll be rejected if you agree with one of the candidates. What happens is that you might be surrounded by people that believe the exact same thing that you believe, but nobody's willing to express their opinion. Luckily, in those cases, well, we have the voting is secret, so nobody really knows what you're going to vote. But it really can hurt the perception of a candidate because, nobody's willing to talk to them. And we saw this recently, and with the assassination attempt on Trump, many people overcame that fear. And many people who would never say that they were supporting Trump, they started being open about that. But you see that in the weeks after that, the media worked overtime to reinstill that fear. Calling them weird, calling them racist, calling them all those things, calling them Nazi. Again, Nazism is very useful for all the things, even though it has nothing to do with Nazism. And at that point, we will be talking a lot more about that, what really was Nazism and what really, unfortunately, still is. This is not new. So the Abilene paradox is found even in some traditional tales, like the short story from Hans Christian Andersen, The Emperor's New Clothes. We have this tailor that convinced everybody that if you didn't see the clothes, it was because you were stupid, because it was a special fabric that only smart people could see. And everyone from the emperor to every person in his kingdom, they all claim that they saw what never existed. It required the innocence and the boldness and the lack of fear of a child to make everyone realize of their mistake, of their deception that they fell for. But at that point, the tailor was, again, thousands of miles away, enjoying the riches that he could take from the people. Let's revisit why does this work so fine? And there's basically two reasons. The first one is that it's really easy to implement. You remember probably that circus act of the plate spinning? When somebody puts plates on top of sticks and then they spin them for a few seconds and they go to the other one and they spin the other one. The plates keep spinning and they can have 20, 30 plates spinning at the same time. And they only have to go around and spin it once in a while. This is the same way this works. Once you convince your friends to go to La Cuisine Dégoûtante, they are probably going to keep going there for a long time. Maybe once in a while you need to go and restart the fire or throw a little more fuel into that fire. But it's really easy to manipulate a large number of people doing this. So one person can really influence the decisions of many full countries, I would argue. And the other reason why this technique works so good is because it uses at least 4 of the 7 principles of persuasion identified by Robert Cialdini. So let's review what are those. The principle he identified, the first one is reciprocity. That means that people don't want to feel in debt, right? The second one is commitment. So once you said that you were going to do something or that you believe in something, even though you change your mind, it's important for you to show that you're consistent. So you will stay with your former beliefs, even if you don't believe them anymore. The third one is social proof, right? It's the validation of the crowd. So if you believe that other people are doing something because they like it, you will say that you will do the same thing and you would like the same thing. The other one is the principle of authority. If somebody comes with PhD in their name, well, you're most likely to get their approval just because you believe of that authority. It could be police or it could be several things, but basically that's it. The liking is that you enjoy when you believe that other people like the same thing that you do. Scarcity is another one. Call now, we're running out of. So that kind of manipulation or persuasion. Manipulation and persuasion are basically the same thing. They are different in their purpose, right? You usually try to influence for good or persuade for good, right? And manipulate for selfish reasons. And the last one is unity. You have to have that idea of the spirit de corps where it's us against them. So if you think about it, this Abilene paradox actually uses commitment, right? If they make you say that you don't like McDonald's, well, most likely you will never tell them that you actually love McDonald's. Social proof, you believe that everybody else dislikes McDonald's and that everybody else likes and goes to Le Cuisine Dégoûtante. Well, that gives us that validation. Also the liking, you want to be part of the group that like that. And the unity. Now you all agree that you're going together and you all despise those simpletons that go to McDonald's. I think this is a very interesting piece of the puzzle that sometimes we don't think about, but it really affects us every day. If I could give you a homework before we meet, I would invite you to watch a movie. It's a German movie called Goodbye Lenin. And I think that it illustrates pretty well how even good intentioned people, could make bad decisions. Also, as always, try to find connections. Try to find which other pieces of the puzzle connect to this. And hopefully in the future, we will be discussing some of them. Until then, I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope to see you back in the next episode. Bye.